Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Small Screen Star Wars. As always, I am Julian and Rachel. I'm joined by Rachel Wilkinson.
Hello.
And we are going to be talking about today Star Wars The Bad Batch, 2 episodes, Season 2, Episode 7, The Clone Conspiracy, and Season 2, Episode 8, Truth and Consequences. And you know what? I got to say, I do feel good about the fact that I wasn't the only one who didn't realize that this was going to be a 2-part episode until last week.
Oh, okay.
Because even friend of the show Ryan Airy on
yes.
on Screen Crush, he was like, "Oh yeah, we didn't realize this was a 2-parter either." So they were like late to post their recaps too, which is funny. So I don't feel as bad is the lesson there.
Yeah. So nobody knew. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure somebody knew, but
no one was paying attention.
I don't know when. Like, so if you go into IMDb, in fact, I'm gonna do this thing because for those who may not be aware,
we didn't even have all the episode names until recently.
I feel like that's I feel like that is also true.
So how would we have known if they were, unless they had a schedule somewhere that said like 2 were coming out on one day without the name? But
I don't know when this information was revealed, but I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
If you go into IMDb and you look at, in fact, let me switch to this. For those who are watching live, I will switch to the my little screen here. For those who look on IMDb, you can go to all episodes, and then if you click on that, it'll give you the whole list of the season. Now, you get little like images for the episodes that have come out, but the ones that don't have are just blank. But they have all the names, right? So we talked about this last week. We talked about all the names of the episodes, and it also says next to them their release date. So you'll notice that the finale is also a 2-parter, The Summit and Plan 99, which presumably takes them back to Mount Tantus. But we'll wait to speculate on that until the end of March. But I know that we were clicking every week, and we were like clicking on next episode, and you would reveal the title. I didn't think to click on all episodes, so it's possible this information was there before and I just wasn't aware. So
fair enough.
Anyway, we caught up eventually. And speaking of catching up, if you haven't done so already, I would recommend going and checking out our Star Wars Podcast Day special episode that we posted earlier this week.
Yeah.
And personally, there's 2 things. It's nice to look forward at the year and realize that there's not a lot of Star Wars content in the summer. Selfishly. The other thing is Rachel's audio is not as great as it normally is. Obviously, she sounds great most of the time, but we had a little technical glitch, and eagle-eyed listeners will have heard. But the problem is it was designed for new listeners. So if you're a new listener, I'm sure you'll be like, wow, she sounds so much better. But you know, they were treated to not our best production quality. That being said, we're back on schedule here. We've got I'm just pulling up the show from last week. For those who are looking, you can go to our website, towerbabble.ca, and find everything that we do there. And if you want to keep up with when we're going live, which of course we do on YouTube and Twitch every Thursday night for the Bad Batch recaps, around 7:30 to 8 p.m. This is a little bit later, 8:30 p.m. Central. But there's a reason for that. It's because this 2-parter is very dense. It's not just 2-parter, it's an extremely dense 2-parter. So there's lots to talk about. And I don't want to ramble on much longer because we have to get into this episode if we want to finish this before midnight. But I will remind people, if you want to keep up with all this stuff, of course, subscribe to us on the live platforms, but follow us on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast, Facebook.com/TowerBabbleCast. Leave us a review on your podcast player of choice. And if you have a little bit of extra disposable income, if you want to help support the show, head over to Patreon.com/TowerBabbleCast, where for as little as $2.50 or $5, you can help support the show. At the $2.50 level, you get access to our Discord, our private Discord channel, where you can chat with us and be a part of the TOB community. And then at $5, you get access to our, this is new for me, Rachel, because I haven't had to do the 2-tier spiel yet.
Right.
At like this anyway. At the $5 level, you get access to our monthly film clubs, and we do an exclusive monthly episode where we review a random movie. One of the three of us, myself, Rachel, or Jeremy from the regular show, pick a movie. We alternate our picks. Although we're gonna have to start switching our picks, otherwise we're picking the same. I think was it you that mentioned that we're gonna be picking the same months?
Otherwise, we always pick the same months each year because there's like the three of us or whatever. But yeah.
Okay, so anyway, we'll have to figure that out. But this coming month,
we should do a Discord pick. Make somebody in the Discord pick.
I agree.
Every like few months
to do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll choose at random, and you have to decide.
And then and then that way that automatically forces us to redistribute our picks. Yeah. So that's good. This month, Jackie Brown. Look forward to that Quentin Tarantino classic, Jackie Brown. So, all right. Let's get into a natural segue to Star Wars. Let's get into Star Wars The Bad Batch. And we'll start with, of course, the Clone Conspiracy. This is, like I said, it's a 2-part episode. They are the same creative team. So directors Brad Rao and Nathaniel Villanueva, written by Dave Filoni, Jennifer Corbett. The logline for episode 7, The Clone Conspiracy, which, by the way, nice to see nice to see Star Wars using the modern reboot naming convention, because, of course, there is a classic Clone Wars episode called Clone Conspiracy, right? So
okay, I was going to ask that because I'm like, and I feel like there's also one pretty close to Truth and Consequences.
I'm pretty sure they're the same. Like they're the Order 66 early leak episodes from season 6. I want to say.
Okay.
Clone Wars. One of my favorite arcs. I think it's so cool. That's when Fives discovers the truth about Order 66.
Right.
And,
yes.
And unfortunately, pays the ultimate price for doing so. All that being said, all they did here was add "the" to the title, so it's The Clone Conspiracy, which of course is the Predator and all that. There's a million of those versions where you run out of names and then you just go back to the original and just add a "the," or remove the "the." Those are both possible options.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay. So in that case, let's get into this. Obviously, this is a spiritual successor to those episodes from the Clone Wars. This episode does feel very much like a Clone Wars episode, so much so that despite this being called The Bad Batch, I don't know what's going on with Star Wars and these shows that are titled after certain people. Looking at you, the Book of Boba Fett, not actually featuring the characters from the titular from the title. So this does not feature the Bad Batch at all, and it's probably the widest voice cast we've had in this show on an episode basis in a long time. There's 2, 3, 4. There's like 6 or 7 different people providing voices, including Jennifer Hale, longtime voice actor, famous for video games. She did the female Shepard for Mass Effect, for those who are sci-fi fans, which I assume you are because you're listening to this show. But she voices a couple characters in this episode. She voices Commerce Guild Senator, as well as, of course, Senator Chuchi. So
isn't she also Bastila? Bastila Shan from the Old Republic?
Let's pull up her IMDb here, and we can look at it together.
I think she is
known for Mass Effect.
I could be wrong.
Also, Ralph Breaks the Internet. Let's see here. Oh my God, she's in so many things. Overwatch 2. She's Ash. She's in.
I'm pretty sure I saw it on the Ryo Chuchi Wikipedia near the bottom or something. I think it told me that.
This is an endless list of things that she's in.
Oh yeah.
I think she just. I guess they don't pay her enough because she just makes it up in quantity here. I'm not like, she does great work all the time. She's in Star Trek Lower Decks, which is a show that I love. She plays Lieutenant Durga and a dog, which is funny.
On the Wikipedia for Senator Chuchi here, it says at the bottom on behind the scenes that she's voiced by Jennifer Hale, who also played. Oh shit! Sorry, there's a house phone ringing in the background here.
Who has a landline?
I'm house sitting.
That's the funniest sound to hear. Like this, old school, like okay, it's fine. Well, because we're on a tangent anyway. I will say this: Star Wars in Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. You know who Jennifer Hale plays?
Who?
The voice of Ayla Secura.
There we go. Yeah.
There you go. So that's a cool little deep cut. I'm sure she's done other stuff. Let's see if I can find Clone Wars in this list. She was Ayla Sakura in that, and Lolo Purrs, Rio Chuchi. I'm sure this list probably goes on. This new design of this doesn't help me. The new design of IMDb makes it so you can't read entire lists of things easily. It's actually quite annoying. I don't love the redesign, but anyway.
Anyway, well known to Star Wars at least.
Well known to, I think, anyone who plays video games or is in the nerddom in any way. She's very well regarded. Yeah. And of course, we also get Sharon Duncan Brewster back in this episode, who plays Senator Pamlo. We've seen Senator Pamlo before in Rogue One. She nicely tees up our hero in that movie, Jyn Erso, with the famous line, "Rebellions are built on hope," right? Because she's all scared and is ready to like hide from the Death Star. But at least in this episode, she's still got a little teeth. She's still got a little fight in her. And also, good to know. It's actually nice to see her here because we really only saw her in that one scene in Rogue One, and we didn't really know. I didn't really know what her background is here, and it's good to see that she's, not only she's very similar to Bail Organa in how she's in her job, right? She's both a senator and a secret rogue rebel, right? So,
right, yeah.
So that's the little tee up there. Again, the logline: a conspiracy begins to unravel, which is accurate. Okay. So let's start because we got a lot to cover here. We start on Coruscant, and it's nice to see Coruscant. We've got a lot of Coruscant lately, actually.
I just found it looked so good, like Coruscant at night. That first shot,
so nice. Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful. Like all the lights and the speeders going by and everything, and like the depth of it. I'm like, man, that looks so good. Like
it's so detailed.
It still amazes me. I know we say it all the time, but like the animation, it's just, I don't know. I feel like every few episodes, there's like at least a few points where I really go like, wow, that looks good.
Wow, you're like, you could put that on your wall. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's beautiful.
It's so nice, and obviously, what stands out here for me is the Venators in orbit. It was not something we saw really.
Yeah.
In the Clone Wars era during the Republic era, so that's pretty cool. We cut to an exterior shot of the Clone Bar 79s, and inside we have two clones sitting at the bar talking about. By the way, this is a bar we saw in that episode, Clone Conspiracy.
I was gonna say, I'm almost positive that's the same clone bar. Yeah,
it is. Two clones are sitting at the bar talking about how Rampart is lying to the galaxy about the destruction of Kamino. Apparently, they were there. They were on board his Venator and took part in destroying Tapoka City. Their names are Slip and Cade. And Cade, who is kind of leading the charge on this in this conversation, feels particularly guilty. He apparently warned Rampart. This is dumb. His fault.
Right? I know.
Real stupid.
I'm like, you don't tell the bad guy.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, I guess he's still. This is, I guess, some of the. What's interesting here in this episode is a lot of kind of like, sure, there's a conspiracy that's coming to light, and there's like a depth and darkness that I think people are realizing. Some people are waking up to. Rex Slater talks about how clones are waking up, but that's that's a loaded term. But in this case, they're waking up to the fact that there's more to what's going on than what the Empire is telling them, and. Anyway, Cade gives Rampart the option to come forward before he reveals the truth himself, right? Which again is a dumb idea, or at least like if you're gonna do that, at least don't be in a public setting afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, oh, I'm giving him the chance to tell them himself, or else I'm gonna do it. It's like, that's a real good way to get yourself murdered. Like, I should have just told them yourself, guy. It's yeah, you just put a big target on your back because he's obviously just going to kill you because he doesn't want to tell them. So
right,
so you got to at least use some kind of blackmail or like get something out of it beforehand.
Clones aren't really like troopers like that. Aren't really trained in the art of deception.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I guess they don't really know how the real world maybe works with that kind of thing either.
They clearly do not. And I think the main takeaway here is the guilt that they feel. He says that they're not bad people, but what they did was wrong, right? And he's determined to go forward to the Senate. Cade heads outside, and as he's asking Slip for help and admitting that what they did was wrong, he gets shot in the back from a sniper across the street.
Yep.
Which I feel like that's not exactly what happened, of course, in that last episode, but that clone bar is just like very out in the open.
Yeah.
Like
super out in the open. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they probably didn't choose it based on like its security profile, but fair enough. And so Slip makes a quick getaway. I do like that he checks for the pulse on Cade first, which is nice. And he makes a quick getaway on a speeder, this cool like move that he pulls where it like backs up and he like jumps on the
liked
side.
that. I was like, ooh, that's a cool getaway to like use the bike as a shield and then just drop down into the traffic. Yeah.
I mean, super dangerous, but very cool. And while he makes his getaway, some other clones in the area kind of secure the perimeter. We get a shadowy shot of the assassin, but they're wearing dark armor. And we can't really see who they are, and we haven't really seen that armor before. Did you think that it was maybe Crosshair that was...
I did for a second, because they could just kind of show him, the assassin from behind. And then I was like, either that or Adam thought maybe it was Fennec, Shan.
Sure.
Just, just from the shape and the shadow. And I was like, oh, maybe. I'm like, or is it Crosshair? But then, later when you see his actual, like, helmet, and well, quote unquote face, but not his face, I was like, oh, that's a cool looking guy. I wonder who this is. But
yeah, I at first I was like, we get the sniper scope first person perspective first. And I was like, oh, maybe it is Crosshair. That's interesting that they'd have him doing this job. But then he misses like twice.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was thinking too.
There's no way.
I was like, I feel like if it was Crosshair, they'd both be real dead. Like it wouldn't be. He's too good of a shot. So
the guy who shot down the barrel of a tank.
From
I don't think is gonna miss.
No,
just a regular trooper hiding behind a bike. So yeah.
No.
Anyway. The assassin makes an escape, and then we cut to the Imperial Senate, and honestly, anytime we can hang out in the Imperial Senate is A-okay with me. Grand
Felt
Vizier...
like a Clone Wars episode again.
100%.
Yeah.
This episode is basically just a Clone Wars episode.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
It's also a nice kind of follow-up to a lot of the stuff we saw in Andor, because what do they talk about in Andor? I mean, they talk about the fact that the Senate is, isn't really attended anymore. We also, of course, if you keep thinking about this, we also know that the Senate is completely dissolved by the time of A New Hope, right?
Right. Yeah.
But again, during the time of Andor, it's something that's like it doesn't really have a lot of power, right?
No.
And it's basically just a sham of what it once was, a shell of its former self. At this time, though, right around just post Republic era, in this transitionary period, the Senate still seems to have some power, which is interesting. And we see Grand Vizier Masamida, and if you're not familiar with Masamida, he is the giant blue guy with the spiky horns. It's literally, it's like I can't describe it any better than that.
The most evil-looking guy that's always behind Palpatine.
That's right. That's 100% correct. And he's been there a long time. I think we've seen him since episode 1. This is when he first appeared in the background. And they are Masamida is presiding over a Senate debate regarding the defense recruitment bill. That's of course the bill we heard about. Crosshair overheard clones talking about it in I think the third episode of the season. They are arguing about the cloning facility having been destroyed on Kamino, and that they need to keep clone production going if they want to keep the galaxy secure. But now that they don't have a cloning facility, they want to pass Rampart's new bill so they can maintain security and continue to fight the quote-unquote insurgents in the mid and outer rim. Of course, those insurgents are Not in all cases, but I think the coding here is that they're talking about the rebels, the rebel cells.
Yes. Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, it's the banking clan who are advocating for the bill. And the thing is, I think it's funny is that this kind of obviously went over my head when I was a kid, but when you really think about it, it's pretty wild that the banking clan and the techno union and I think who are the other ones in this one? It's the Commerce Guild have a seat in the Senate. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What kind of democracy has businesses represented in?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Of course, you could. There's a lot of parallels to draw towards real life, where of course industry has way too much influence over politics, which is, I think, the cautionary tale that they're trying to tell here. Anyway, so the businesses are in the pocket of the empire, and they're wanting to push this bill forward because they'll make money off of it. Bail Organa is fighting against it, though, as well. He points out that the Grand Army of the Republic, the GAR, was instituted under the Emergency Powers Act, right? Thank you, Jar Jar Binks. I mean, it's not entirely his fault, but I mean, he did put forward the motion. So
thank you, Jar Jar Binks. He's a Sith Lord,
I think people just think that's like a fun little thing to pretend to like. No one actually believes that's real.
No,
it's like,
I know.
I think that's what people like. If you're a flat earther, I think that you just believe that so you can like hang out with other people that you like.
Yeah,
and you don't actually believe that.
It's like something you pretend like you devil's advocate for it to piss other people off.
That's right. That's right. I think it's a fun idea, but no, come on.
Yeah.
We also see, of course, this is when we see Senator Pomlo, who is saying that they don't need an army anymore because the war's over. And of course, you guys, it's important to remember that the Republic didn't have an army for thousands of years. They didn't need one. There was no military required, right? And the Jedis kept the peace to some degree. Individual systems and planets had their own security forces, but there was no government controlled army until, of course, the Clone Wars, which was orchestrated all by Palpatine. So the senator from the Commerce Guild notes that the clones can't be sustained due to their accelerated aging and should be slated for decommissioning. This is interesting to me because it wasn't clear whether or not the accelerated aging was like widely known. Or if it's something that if I don't know, I'm not even sure if this is a secret meeting or not, but it's not even clear to me if the clones know that they have accelerated aging,
True. So, well, I think they kind of know. I think they know. Well, how would they not know? They age quickly, so how would they not know?
Yeah, but they don't know if that's not normal for them.
That's true, I guess.
You know what I mean?
I thought, though, that, like, yes, they have accelerated aging, but I thought that, like, stopped at a point. Like, I didn't think the accelerated aging continued on, like, so that they get super old really fast. Like,
maybe it slows down later on, but it's about double the speed, is my understanding. That they age about.
Because I guess by Star Wars Rebels, when we see Rex, he's like pretty gray looking.
Well, you think about it this way. Yeah, exactly. So think about it this way. So if they're speeding at double rate, let's say an average person lives till about 85 or 90. So let's assume that a clone lives half as long, so anywhere between 40 to 50 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The Clone Wars are only 3 years long, which I think people forget about, right? So let's assume that a clone like Rex comes into fighting shape in his mid-20s, right? Maybe earlier, maybe by 18, 19. It's not clear. I mean, it doesn't. Based on the face of Jango Fett, it's not.
Yeah.
It seems unlike. But I mean, again, we can speculate here, right?
Yeah. It's hard to know.
So based on that information, they are quite old by the time A New Hope rolls around. So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess they're just like, well, they're getting old. I'm like, oh, I guess, but I mean, I don't know, they're not that old. But yeah, I think it's just kind of that excuse to get rid of them.
Right? Yeah, it is 100%. They're saying, oh, well, they're getting old anyway, so we might as well just decommission them and replace them with people.
Yeah, and I love that decommission, like literally talking like, we'll just kill them all. Like what?
Well, that's I don't think that's what she was advocating for necessarily. I don't think she's saying
I
kill
don't
them
know.
all.
Any other time we heard about them being decommissioned, that meant like dead.
Well, and I think Senator Chuchi arrives here, and Senator Chuchi is a character we've actually known since season 1 of the Clone Wars. She is a very interesting character. I actually, again, voiced expertly, I think, by Jennifer Hale, doing a less than great Australian accent, I guess. Like soft Australian accent. It's very odd.
She sounds like Omega, but less annoying.
Well, Omega's supposed to have a New Zealand accent.
I know, and I know they're two different ones, but those accents are
they're similar.
Similar, as upset as that may make Aussies and New Zealanders or Kiwis. Is that allowed to be? Are we allowed to say Kiwis?
I think so. We'll be corrected if I'm.
Yeah, I was like, I know they don't like being mixed up, but it's kind of like when we get told, like we sound like Americans.
Yeah, that's fair. So here, I'll just read from the Wikipedia. Rio Chuchi, or is it Ryo? Is it Ryo? I think they said her name a couple times, and I forget how it was said already.
They always say Chuchi, but yeah, I can't remember if it's Ryo or
I think
Rio.
It's Ryo.
I think
Ryo
so
Chuchi was a female Pantoran politician. Of course, the Pantorans, you remember, as being the race that George Lucas pretended to be when he appeared in, I think, Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, right. Yes, yes.
They're from the moon of Pantora, which is orbited by the planet Orto Plutonia. Chuchi served as a senator and represented her people in the Galactic Senate of the Republic during the Clone Wars. Chuchi also helped negotiate peace between the Talz tribe on the neighboring planet Orto Plutonia. Later in the war, she would help combat the Trade Federation blockade of Pantora with the help of Jedi Padawan Ahsoka Tano, simultaneously helping the new Pantoran chairman, not Luiski Papanoida. Oh man, that's a rough one. Locate his daughters, whom the Trade Federation had captured and held ransom. The one thing that was cool about her appearance in Star Wars: The Clone Wars Season 1 is that we get to see Rex in like snow armor, and the snow armor in that one.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
From what I remember too, from that whole kind of not arc or whatever those few episodes are when they're trying to get those daughters back, is the Trade Federation is like, oh, like they make it out like it wasn't them. Like they're like, oh no, that was just, those guys, those other Trade Federation guys. Like that wasn't us. Like Newt Gunray, is it Newt Gunray that I can't remember if he's involved in that.
Newt Gunray is the Trade Federation, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he's like, oh no, that was that other guy. He was working alone. Like that wasn't the actual Trade Federation. And then they're like, yeah, for sure we'll take that blockade away. Like, because it was like it was one of those things where it's like, oh, we almost find out they're separatists. But yeah.
Right. She appears in quite a few Clone Wars episodes, like at least easily more than 10. So yeah. Interesting. So she's cool. Glad to see she's back.
She's a very cool look to her too.
She does. It's like the her clothes and like even like the thing she gives Omega later in the second episode.
Yeah, really the little like shawl. Yeah, like everything. Yeah, her character is just beautiful. I love it.
So anyway, she makes an appearance here, and she's advocating on for clone representation in this military spending act. It's like, hey, we're going to talk about decommissioning clones. You're saying you want to quote unquote decommission them. They're not droids to be turned off, which of course I think is an intentional comparison to the droid army, which was just switched off, right? But of course we know that they are essentially treated the exact same way, right? That they were created by the same people essentially, and are treated just as the droids are just as disposable as these people are. Or at least that's how that's how Palpatine treats them and the people he follows him. So she's saying, hey, we can't just throw these guys out onto the street. They're veterans. They protected us, and we can't stand for that. And she reminds them that they gave their life in service. Some of them did. We can't just throw them out on the street. Rampart surprisingly promises to, quote, take care of their needs as they are phased out. He's on the defensive here, basically saying that he's willing to, quote unquote, work together with her and the clones to come to a resolution. But this means that the bill is then tabled for a vote later on until this is resolved. While this is happening, Masamita gives Admiral Rampart the stink eye while this really triumphant music plays. It's an interesting choice. A small win for the good guys here. Masamita and Rampart are then seen walking through the halls of the Senate. Moss is grilling Rampart for not getting the bill passed despite Tarkin vouching for him on Rampart's behalf. Right, so we get the sense that Tarkin was pleased with how things went at the end of last season and has now given the job to Rampart to kind of push this bill through the Senate, which is interesting. It's interesting because it's weird to see an admiral, right, in the Senate advocating for a bill of any kind. At least it would be for us in the way that we run our democracies in most parts of the world. So it's another example of how things are a little bit different in the Star Wars galaxy. And how also it's a sign that throughout the war we saw more military representation in the Republic Senate, and that's transitioned over to the Empire, and it's become a much more militarized organization just in general.
Yeah, because it's like he obviously doesn't represent like a planet or a system. No. He just represents the military. So it's like, well, yeah, like obviously you want more guys because otherwise you won't have a job.
Exactly. Because that's what Senator Pomlo's saying is like, we don't even need the army. Like, let's just ban. Like, okay, fine. Yeah. Let's use the clones until they're done, and then then retire them, and then we're good.
Yeah. Why? But then what are all the humans gonna do? None of them are gonna have jobs because they all work for the.
Wow, I mean,
the Empire's army.
Is that true?
Yeah, I know, but remember how we always talk about how, the Empire is like what we would call like speciesist.
Oh, right, that's right.
About how like you don't see a lot of aliens on those Venators. It's all humans.
That's true.
Right, humans and droids. You don't get a lot of like mixed like race or like species.
Yeah, there's not really aliens on board. Yeah.
No.
So Moss is worried that the senators will dig deeper into what actually happened on Kamino. But Rampart remains confident, saying that he has provisions in place to prevent the truth from coming out. That's, I think, the assassin he's referring to here. But then, interestingly, he says this, which I don't really know what he's talking about, but maybe you can shine some light on this. So he says that he's fine with Chuchi making her clone demands because, quote, once she's appeased, the bill will be approved long before any of the provisions she's seeking for come due, unquote. So what is he saying there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's a veiled threat against her, as in like, oh, we'll deal with her beforehand before she has like a chance to actually pass anything, or whether it's just not going to matter because of what they're going to do to the clones.
I think it's the second one. It's just really weirdly worded, in my opinion, because he's saying is let's break it down kind of one piece at a time. Chuchi can make her clone demands. He's basically saying, I'll appease her. Mm-hmm. He literally says that here, once she's appeased, by telling her what she wants to hear, right? We'll put these clone, what does she call it later? A pension, this clone pension into the bill. And once the bill's passed, which is the goal, and the money is allocated, we have another solution for dealing with the clones. Yeah. So we're never going to have to pay at that pension, I think, is what he's saying, which is extra scummy in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. It's like that's the other thing. Like, how are you just going to wipe all these guys out? Like, they're going to...
It's so weird to me because, like, this Imperial Senate is very confusing because it's like, it seems like they just do whatever they want anyway.
Yeah, right? Yeah, pretty much.
And then they need to like justify it to the Senate some way to get Senate approval. But, you know, if you were never going to pay the clones or whatever. It's like it's just a show, I guess is the point. It's all just a show to keep people from rising up.
Yeah.
Because if they knew that the government didn't give a shit about anybody, then why should they give a shit about the government, I guess is the idea.
Well, exactly. And also it's like, no offense, but like the clones aren't just like regular people either. Like they're trained soldiers. To me, they're not going to be that easy to just wipe out. But
no, I don't. It's interesting. I don't know what they're planning. I mean, maybe there's like an order. Maybe there's like a their Order 66 happened. They have a little chip in their brain. Maybe there's another chip in their brain that like
or the same one
them or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's threatening there, but it is certainly ominous. But I think this is also important, a little foreshadowing. Masamune reminds him that it's his neck on the line here, right? If you don't get this done, there are consequences, he says, right? All right, so back to 79's, back to the bar. Chuchi is now meeting with the clones to, quote-unquote, better understand their needs. There's pushback at first, with one outspoken clone demanding that he stay in service so he can fight insurgents that keep, quote-unquote, popping up, which I think is interesting use of the term popping up, because it does feel very convenient. And in fact, they even mention that later. They don't want rebel activity, but it's convenient to it furthers their goal of inspiring fear and the need for security. So she wants to craft a pension plan, reminding them that there is a life after fighting. I do find this interesting because, I mean, this does ring true to real life, which is this idea that, like, I think this is going on in Canada. There's this concept of like, okay, we're gonna phase out traditional oil manufacturing, right?
Right.
And replace it with cleaner jobs. And typically speaking, people don't like change. So, what you get is pushback saying, well, I don't want to do that. I want to just keep doing the same thing I'm already doing. Right?
Yeah.
And her response to that in this Chuchi's is basically like, well, that's not really an option. And and even if it was, it's like, what would you do once you got too old to fight? Right?
Right, yeah.
And then I like that one of the other clones is like, well, it's not really something we're trained to think about. Which like now that you think about it, it's like it makes sense. It's like you don't want them thinking about what life is after the war because you need them worried about the war. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what they're made for, right? Like that's their programming almost.
It's really interesting. I feel like this show is doing an expert job of walking the tightrope of not diving too deep into the concept of clone rights, because if you think about it too much, it starts getting very problematic, I think.
Well, yeah. That's just like the droid thing too. Like
it's just like it is very much. I was thinking that it's just like the droid thing. Don't think about that too much.
Yeah.
but exploring it enough to make it an interesting plot point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she gives kind of this inspiring speech about how she can help them choose what their life will be like after the war, right? And you have to imagine that would be like very complex. It'd be like you would need funding for re-education so you could retrain them, or for housing, all these types of things that you wouldn't think about. But presumably she's thought about these things. This seems to convince the clones. They get inspired. Slip is at the bar. He sees her and sees her as someone that he can trust. So he approaches her after the meeting outside the bar, and he's like, I like how he's like skulking in the doorway. I think it's really funny. And to tell her that that Rampart can't be trusted, and reveals the truth about Camino while he's hiding in the doorway. He says clones who tried to speak up were either reassigned, went missing, or ended up dead. Right? And she at first doesn't believe him, but he does leave his service number, CT0409, to check his record. If you don't believe me, check my record, right? And then like disappears back into the bar. Certainly ominous when she got involved in this. I don't think she was expecting to be pulled into a conspiracy, but now all of a sudden things are getting much more interesting. Any thoughts on these opening few moments here at the Senate and with Chuchi?
No, I mean nothing. Not that we kind of haven't already gone over, right? Like, yeah, it's just kind of again gives me Clone Wars vibes, and
politics. Get your politics out of my Star Wars.
Get your politics out of the Star Wars, right? Yeah, it makes me laugh. Yeah. But it's kind of like the same sort of Empire shenanigans that they're trying to cover up their tracks. But I do also like that it's any time a clone has tried to tell them about like these conspiracies that are going on or something that's going on, they always sound like crazy, right? Same thing happened with Fives.
Well, they also like start acting crazy, which is like I feel like doesn't help their message. No. They like it's like guys, just relax for a second, get your message out, and then start freaking out because when you start like acting like a wacko, you don't you're not gonna you don't come across as very reliable. So
no, well that and like, but I mean the poor guy has seen a bunch of his buddies get killed already.
He just saw his friend get murdered over this information, so of course he's nervous. Okay, so next we transition to a bunch of scenes that are kind of like all over Coruscant. So at first, Chuchi is having her guards look for Slip. This is mentioned in her office at the Senate. If you think about this, what's actually most impressive about this sequence here is all the different locations. And in animation, you did think about that because those all need to be modeled. So, I mean, presumably her office was maybe been modeled for the Clone Wars. Some of these other things for other episodes of the Clone Wars or other things, I guess. But they've obviously reused locations from season 7 and season 6 and other stuff. So that's
right.
So next we see Slip on his stolen bike. Maybe it's not stolen. Maybe it is his bike. Is hiding out in the industrial district of Coruscant. We see him make a call to somebody on his comm for help. He's in trouble. He needs to get out. Right? We don't know who he's calling, but I was like, he's for sure calling Rex.
That's that's what I assumed as well. I was like, yeah, it's got to be.
Next, we see Chuchi meet with Rampart at his office, and he's questioning her on the feasibility of funding a full pension and a new military. He's like, well, how can we pay for both? And it's like, well, if you can't pay for both, then maybe it's not the right time for your new military, is her response.
Which is the right answer. Like, if you can't pay to support your current military, then you definitely don't have money to start a new one. So what the hell? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He does remind her that of the reality, quote unquote, of the insurgency going on in the Outer and Mid Rim. But he does then say, I agree with you about the future of the clones requiring future discussion and planning. We owe it to them for their service, right? Again, master of telling people what they want to hear.
Yes.
For some reason, though, I found this funny. So she's like, he's sitting at his desk and like they're talking about this stuff, and then like she just makes this random. It's obviously not random because she was just told this information and all this stuff, but like in the context of the conversation, it's kind of a non sequitur where she's like, speaking of those storms on Camino, it's like, oh, we were speaking of those storms on Camino. How did you manage to survive? Right? Like, is this as if that's not already public available information? He says that he was on a training mission off world, and then does this whole thing about, oh, it's such a shame. All these people, all these Kaminoans who are, died. And she says, the majority of Kaminoan population was lost, Admiral. That is more than tragic.
Yeah,
And this answer from him is, we must move forward. And this, of course, again, I don't think these are mistakes or accidents. The human mind's very good at finding connections. But for me, what I think of when I think of that is every time there's a shooting in the U.S., there's like, thoughts and prayers, and then we can't, it's not the right time to debate this. We have to move forward, right?
Yeah.
Is the constant refrain we hear over and over and over again. I think that's what they're trying to call allusion to. It's like, oh, this tragic thing happened. We could have done something about it, but we got to move forward. We can't think about this now, right?
Yeah,
it's never the right time, right?
Exactly. Which, and then like she says, it's so much easier for some than others to do that.
And, where's your soul is what she said.
Yeah. It's like, you can say that, but like, who can't say that? All the Kaminoans. So.
Well, yeah, and I think it's also interesting. I didn't really, maybe I'm soulless, but I didn't really think of it as like a genocide of the Kaminoans. That's not how, like, when that was happening last season, that's not what I was thinking about. Maybe others were, and good on you. I was kind of thinking about it in more of like as a beginning of the end for the clones, which of course we have much closer connection to. I don't really like the Kaminoans, to be honest. They're not very likable.
No.
You know?
And I think it's because every time we see Kamino, we see more of like the facility and the clones and the training. It's like we don't really see like Kaminoan life.
We don't really know anything about what Kaminoan life is or what these people do, because
kind of see a few of them walking around, but it seems like it's mostly clones there. Like in that, to me, it was more of always like a facility. It wasn't like a city.
Well, yeah, and the other thing, I mean, it's Tapoka City. It is a city technically, but like the other thing that's interesting is, of course, we saw an abandoned cloning facility in last season of the Bad Batch.
Yes.
Right. Which means they are kind of like a species that doesn't necessarily settle down in one place.
Right.
You know. Which means, and you know, we don't really know where they originally come from. It implies that they're not originally from Kamino, which means that they maybe are from the outer regions, or in wild space or something, right? We don't know, and I think that is interesting. Later we hear from a Kaminoan about it, and they don't seem as broken up about it. So there's something interesting there. But again, this is not to just say, oh well, it doesn't matter that they were all wiped out. It's just not something that I necessarily thought about, because we just weren't really exposed to them as a culture, really.
Right.
They were just more of just like the guys who made the clones, Also interesting, we didn't really talk about this, but the excuse that they used for the destruction of Tapoka City is that a giant storm came up and destroyed it. And no one, like, I'm sure it sounds like people question that, but like it when you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous.
Oh yeah. Well, especially because doesn't she bring that up with Rampart too? And she's like, funny how that those facilities and
that was with Bill
the other senator, right?
Bill Organa says that he's like, this submersible city somehow gets destroyed by
gets destroyed by a storm, and you're like, what the hell? Like how? Yeah, and that too, and it's like, oh, it's just gone. There's like nobody else going there to investigate, seeing that they're like.
Right,
the wreckage is covered in Venator blasts. Scorch marks, and exactly.
It's funny. So as Chuchi walks out, there's this interesting choice of lingering on Rampart's face as she leaves. He seems to be like pondering something. At first, I was like, is he conflicted about this? But no, I don't think so. He's just pondering.
I think he's just pondering about like how much does she know?
Yeah.
Like, he's just kind of like, oh, fuck, she knows something, but how much?
Right. So as Chuchi's walking, and of course, remember, she's at this military installation because that's where Rampart's office is. So as she's walking past the war memorial that we saw, of course, prominently in episode 3, we hear that she received a secure communication. So next we see her meet up with a droid outside of an alleyway we learn is R2C4. And she's surprised that she's meeting with Bail Organa here. So they have a covert meeting. He mentions her quote-unquote stir at the Senate, but she has kind of a great comeback saying that it's quote-unquote curious how speaking up for what's right has become an act that causes a stir, unlike inaction, apathy, or ignorance. I think this is like a top-tier Star Wars line, in my opinion, because, again, drawing parallels to reality, it does feel like when you speak up for what is quote-unquote feels right, like people's rights,
Well, that's the thing, like equal rights and, that kind of thing.
All of a sudden, you're, there's all this kind of like, there's all this fighting about it. It's like, there shouldn't be fighting about this.
No. Yeah, exactly. No, it's funny, but it's like there's a lot of those kind of real world parallels going on these days.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's on the top of everyone's mind, including the creators of the show. So he asks, Bail Organa asks about the meeting with Rampart, and he's kind of curious how it went. But she said that she was surprised that he agreed to many of her demands for the clones. He warns about Rampart, saying he's good at saying what you want to hear. He then brings up the insurgencies again. I think it's interesting that they keep using that word, and he kind of even puts it in quotes himself, saying that if more systems revolt, it will threaten Palpatine's empire. He ties it into the convenience of the storm destroying Kamino, making room for this new, Imperial military. I think what's happening in this kind of like these 3 sentences basically is he is doing a soft recruitment to the rebellion. He says like,
oh
if you listen, there's whispers. She doesn't really pick up on that. I don't think. But I think that's what he's trying to do there. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's trying to give her enough that she can sort of figure it out herself, but without,
right,
I don't know, necessarily
implicating
like
himself. Yeah,
getting himself too involved. But it's also kind of funny. Like it's like, Bill, just tell her what she needs to know. Don't
yeah.
you
No,
don't
you
need to
can't. You can't.
speak in
It's too
codes.
soon. It's too
Yeah,
soon.
I guess. I think it's just kind of that little bit of like they still don't know who to trust,
Well, and
even
I think
amongst themselves.
I think they know each, like these senators know each other pretty well. I think it's pretty clear in this episode and the next that Chuchi's not really up for the task of being a covert operator. She
Right,
makes
yeah.
many mistakes here.
Yeah.
So, it's probably best for the rebellion that she's not involved at this stage.
Yeah.
All right. So Chuchi logically associates what he's saying with Slip, who she says she's searching for. But Organa reminds her to be careful. Others may be looking for him as well. Smash cut to Rampart's office. He's questioning his assassin over the holo. We hear his voice for the first time, but it's distorted. We also get this really cool synthy music that plays here as well. I don't know what theme this is necessarily, if it's a Rampart's theme or what it is, but it also plays during the end credits, and it's like very cool in my opinion. The assassin mentions that Chuchi's guards are searching for Slip as well, and Rampart gives him the go-ahead to take out the senator and her guards if she finds him. They can't be allowed to get his information, and then says, "Make sure it can't lead back to me." Right, so we understand the stakes now. It's pretty clear. Back with Slip, he's waiting for his pickup, but they're late. We get to hear a distorted transmission from Rex, but as soon as I hear his voice, it's like, well, it's clearly Rex. I mean, at that point,
Yeah.
I knew for sure, but it wasn't,
I mean,
it's not technically revealed yet.
Even though they all sound the same, it's like still Rex. I don't know.
No, you can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the meantime, Chuchi finds him and says she believes him about the whole Camino incident, but he's worried about his own life, despite her saying that she can protect him. Right? I think he's like, "You're not listening. Someone was already murdered, and my friend was murdered. I can't stay here. Right? You don't need me." She convinces him to at least hear her out, but he's acting all erratic. Right? He keeps moving around. She wants him to testify before the Senate, and wants justice for the other clones that have died for this, and to hold Rampart accountable, right? And just as Slip is telling her that she doesn't need him and that he saved evidence of the attack aboard Rampart's Venator, he's shot by the assassin as he steps out into an alleyway.
Yeah.
Really cool action sequence follows with Chuchi's guards trying to protect her. They don't last very long.
No.
They enter a boiler room type location. There's all this steam everywhere.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. And the way that they use the lighting through the steam and all that is really awesome.
I love that. There's the smoke and the fog and there's steam, whatever you want to call it. But then almost like the warehouse windows behind with the light. Yeah, it all looked really, really cool. I'm like, I felt like I was watching I don't know, like an action movie where this would happen, in a boiler room.
At the end of, I'm pretty sure at the end of Commando, there's a fight in a room similar to this.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Arnold Schwarzenegger throws a pipe through a guy's chest and says, "Let off some steam, Bennett."
I was just gonna say it feels like a scene that you would see Arnold Schwarzenegger in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
So she's very scared. Her last remaining guard forces the door open, gets shot in the chest while doing so, and then sacrifices himself to give her a chance to escape. It looks like she's going to get caught, but it turns out it's actually Rex in this hooded figure who shoots the stuns, I guess, the assassin, and saves Chuchi. It's nice to see Rex here. any thoughts on this action sequence that we already mentioned? Or
yeah, I mean,
else?
it was just cool in general, and like this is another one of those things where she doesn't have any plot armor either, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
We don't really
no.
see her in anything else like timeline after this. So yeah, I'm like she could die at any point during this, right?
Yeah. I didn't get the
But
impression. I mean, it is kind of cool to hear someone say, even the senator, and he's like, yeah, even the senator, take her out. And
yeah,
then, like,
right?
there's that shot of her like almost being shot by the assassin, like she's standing in the open and then like moves at the last second.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
tension is cool. I think they do a good job of, but no, I never felt like she was really in danger.
I didn't either. I kind of felt like, oh my god, like I think they're gonna let her get out of this one or whatever. But yeah, no, but you're right though. Hearing Rampart just be like that kind of ruthless too regarding her, it's just like that's another like not another, but she's like a full blown member of the Senate, and like you've no issue just telling this.
Yeah,
Now
just take
we
her
find
out.
a later
Yeah.
clone to take her out. Yeah.
Yeah. So she tells Rex about how Slip was trying to help reveal the truth about Camino, and then I'm like, how much does Rex knew about what happened on Camino? Like, do we? I'm always curious to know what Rex knows and when he learned it and what he does with that information. It feels like he knows everything that the audience does.
Yeah.
Because like later on, he's like, "Oh, Palpatine was ahead of us the whole time, even during the war," and it's like, I guess you learned about the Order 66, but did you know that it was Palpatine himself that ordered it, or like?
Yeah, because he's the one that shows up on the Hollow.
Right, he takes the order directly from.
Yeah,
him.
On the Hollow.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So I don't know. He guess he's smarter than the average clone, so he pieces this stuff all together.
Yeah.
So Rek opens the assassin's helmet to reveal that underneath it is a clone, but more importantly, not a trooper. There's a distinction. He's a clone, but he's not a clone trooper.
So right, because he doesn't have a number, right? Like
he doesn't have a number.
Distinguishing.
But I guess like the idea is like Boba Fett's a clone, but he's not a clone trooper either, right?
Yeah, it's
so
true.
I guess the idea is that like you have to be trained to be a trooper, and he's not. He's
right.
There's something different about this clone.
Yeah.
So he wants to question him, but he wants to do it somewhere else. So we see that he's using the Martez sisters' garage. See, it all comes. It all works. The Martez sisters worth it all after all because Rex gets to use his garage.
Do you think they use that hideout garage because it was easier than drawing up a new?
100%, and like it's 100% that, and
cut
also
some hours down on the animation side,
or maybe like 90% that and 10%. Oh, it's a cool connection because I think don't we already know that the Martez sisters and Rex have a connection? So
I think so, but it's just funny that he's just like they're not here right now.
Yeah.
They're away for the moment,
that's good.
And everyone
very convenient.
breathes a sigh of relief that we don't have to deal with them.
That's funny. So we see, again the garage, but we also get some really cool establishing shots of that like elevator tube and like the specific shaft that Ahsoka used at the end of season 7 and all that kind of stuff. So, he says a couple of friends of mine own this garage. They're gone for a bit. So yeah, the clone. So the clone wakes up and refuses to answer any of Rex's questions. He says that he's not wearing any identifiable markings, and won't tell him who he's working for. But he does reveal that he knows who Rex is.
Right. Yeah.
And that, which is interesting because like, how would he? Unless he's not a trooper, but he knows Rex, so that's interesting.
Well, Rex is the only blonde one, so.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, that's right, and he's not wearing his distinguishing armor either. So I mean, that's interesting too.
Yeah.
And he also says that Rex is fighting the wrong battle, and then I love how he uses he says he calls him brother, which of course is the thing that clones call each other, but he says it in this like very like knowing way, which is interesting. Before saying Rex is limited, which is such an interesting choice of words, right? I guess implying that he has limited knowledge or limited understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a thing that we always hear like dark side Sith and Force users say that kind of thing.
You're being held back by the
other Jedi where they're like, oh, like you're limited, like you don't understand like the power of the dark side, like that kind of thing. But this is like the clone version of that.
Yeah, I guess. He says that he's a believer, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And he bites down on some sort of like suicide pill.
That was cool. The Star Wars version
cool.
of a cyanide pill. I was like, have we seen this before? I can't remember.
I think I want to say yes, actually.
I don't know if it was in Star Wars or if it was in a different movie that we've watched recently.
With like a bite and then the head zaps.
Yeah, like I
just feel like I've seen that.
I know, me too, but I think
it was starting. I'm 99% sure it was Star Wars, and it was something
probably
that yeah.
Like I feel like I have also seen this in like some kind of, I don't know, action movie or sci-fi movie.
We must have talked about it because I feel like I remember commenting on like, oh, it was cool to see the skull and stuff like with the zapping and
yeah. I don't know, but
it's so cool here.
Funny. It is. It's like it's a very It's again, it was one of those like things that they take from real life, but
so what do you
add a little?
What do you make of this guy?
He's interesting because just because of the way he was speaking, right? Like to me, he sounded more like a fanatic, and he sounded a little bit more.
Yeah, like a cultist.
Yeah, like exactly. He's like, calling yourself a believer is interesting.
Here's someone I don't know if I think this was suggested on on Ryan Airy's YouTube show. That it's like, what if I was either that or someone else's, so I apologize if I'm misattributing this. But what if all the Sith cultists at the end of episode 9 are just clones? And that's how there's so many of them. Like, how do they staff? How are they going to staff all those ships? Right at the end of episode 9, there's like thousands of those Star Destroyers with the planet destroying weapons on them. How are they going to staff those without people? Right. So maybe they're clones. I like that as an idea. We do see some of them. Obviously, not all of them are clones, obviously, but I like that as a concept. I like the idea of the Sith troopers that we see in episode 9 being Jango clones.
Interesting.
It keeps them involved in the canon longer, and I think that is cool.
Right.
So
yeah.
Anything that gives them an excuse.
I'm assuming you mean
later.
Like new versions, like they're not
newly printed. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Newly printed. Yeah. I mean, you never know, but it's just very interesting because I feel like that's the way he's talking. I've heard that more from like, I don't know, like the fanatics of like Death Watch or like, the Mandalorians or like that kind of thing, not necessarily out of clones.
Well,
saying
this is kind
I'm
of the
believer,
distinction between him being a trooper and being a clone but not a trooper. He obviously is. He's trained in the art of assassinhood,
right?
But is clearly not indoctrinated into the Grand Army of the Republic thinking.
Yeah.
Or there's some other type of chip that they've installed in these clones as being like the next level up to Order 66. I mean, I don't know, but it's interesting to explore it for sure.
Yeah. No, I just thought he was kind of creepy, and I'm like, interesting. I'm curious about this guy, and if there's more of them too.
Well, I think we're gonna have to explore this more, for sure. Anyway, Rex and Chuchi are shocked. Cut to black. Cool ass music plays over the credits. So that's episode 1. That took us forever. So, any thoughts on this episode before we quickly move on to the next?
No, I don't think so. Like, it's just, I'm glad we got 2. I'm excited that they did these ones kind of back to back.
Oh yeah, me too. I think it's
I
mean, you say that, but I also think this would have been a really cool way to like cliffhanger.
Like cliffhanger, yeah, that's true. I get what you're saying because it's like, ooh, like the next, you know what I mean? Like next week would have been like, yeah, that's true. Either way, but I mean, yeah, for like, again, I feel bad because this is another one of those episodes that I very much enjoyed, and it didn't have any Bad Batch.
The Bad Batch. I mean, I think that's a good thing to mention here, but at the same time, I think the show is clearly, it's done this now a couple times, and it's clearly saying, yes, the show is called The Bad Batch. This is a spiritual successor to the Clone Wars, a literal sequel in some cases. So there is other things that we need to explore.
Yeah, it doesn't have to just be Bad Batch every day, like every episode.
So I think that's fine. I also really enjoyed this episode. I think it's really brilliantly paced. I think it's it really. I mean, I think it works better than even the follow-up episode. Again, not shitting on the Bad Batch themselves again, even though that's their episode. I just think that the political intrigue and the setup of the mystery is so interesting.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I would agree.
What's cool here, which I really appreciate, is because with the Order 66 stuff, what was awesome about that is we knew it was coming, right?
Right.
And so we get to kind of like live in this kind of like awkward area where you're like, we know what's going to happen to you guys, and oh, this person snapped early, and what does that mean? Is it like, but we also know it all goes through, right? So it kind of robbed it a little bit of its stakes. In this case, we know that there isn't clones later. We know there's stormtroopers, but we don't know how or what happened to the clones necessarily. So there's still a lot of intrigue there to mine. And what I like about this even more, I think, is that the Clone Wars was like, hey, get to know these clones. Aren't they cool and nice, and aren't they awesome? Become friends with them, right?
Yeah.
Even though you know what's coming, right? Which I think is a hard thing to do, but they pulled it off. And I think anyone who's watched the Clone Wars is a fan of the clones as characters. I think they were well established, and then to go through and do Order 66 now countless times in different ways, it hurts just as much every time because we like the clones. Now we're in this other this kind of next phase, but it's kind of like a mirror or a black mirror version of the Order 66 stuff, which is, okay, the clones turned bad. We knew that was going to happen, but now we still like the clones. We some of them are waking up. How can you help them?
Yeah.
Right. And at the same time, now you have this political thing, which again similar to the Order 66 stuff, that is looming over them as a threat. Right. They are going to be decommissioned. That's like the parallel to Order 66. Okay, they're going to turn bad in this case, but in this case, they're going to be decommissioned. Either way, we're rooting against those things from happening, even though we know it's going to happen. Well, in this case, we just don't know how. And I think that adds this extra layer of interest that I really appreciate.
Yeah, I'm just glad we're kind of getting into some of this stuff too now, because this is kind of what I was hoping for.
This is the whole point of the show, I thought.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? There's so much other things going on in the galaxy as a whole, so this is why I was hoping for more to get into start to get into some of these sort of episodes instead of just having those one-off ones that we were dealing with before. So
that one gets a lot of shit, but deservedly so. Okay.
Yeah.
So this takes us to Truth and Consequences, the logline here. This is the same creative team. So same writers, directors. Truth and Consequences. Brought into a risky mission, the batch must use stealth to survive. The worst logline. This is a really cool episode, and this logline makes it sound like the most generic shit. So that's unfortunate, but it's fine. I don't think anyone reads those really that much anyway. Okay, so we start on Ord Mantell, which is, of course, we know where they're stationed. And we're with the batch. This really calm music is playing as sun streams into the ship through Omega's window. And we see that she's meditating. We find out that Gunji taught her how, but she says it's not working the same as it did for him. So, again, she's got to be a Jedi, right? Or Force sensitive, right? I mean, right?
I guess, but this is like maybe in the column of, oh, maybe she's not, because she's like, oh, it doesn't work for me the same way it does for him, right? Like she's saying she's trying to meditate, but it doesn't.
Yeah, but I don't
know.
I think if you're Force sensitive and just if you started meditating, it doesn't mean you start floating rocks,
No, it's
true. You need to be trained on how to meditate the right way and what it means, and you need to like channel all those things are taught, not necessarily inherent skills. So, I don't know. I think it's interesting that I think it's a loaded imagery to have Omega sitting in a beam of light meditating, as if we haven't seen that exact thing before with Yoda and Obi-Wan and, characters that we know are Force sensitive, But
I mean, I could also go sit in a light beam and meditate. And
but you're not in the Bad Batch.
True.
Okay. So also the idea of sitting in a light beam to meditate, lovely. Sounds
does
magical.
Sound beautiful. Yeah.
It's the sun is now. I mean, we're well past the solar solstice, or the winter solstice. So the sun is staying up a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Right around 4:30, the sun streams into the window right onto my couch, and it's like I want to just quit work at that exact moment and just go lie on the couch and sleep.
And just like a cat, just sleep in your
100%.
little sunbeam.
Yeah. In fact, Winston was lying in the sunbeam today, and I took a picture of him. It was on my my Instagram story.
I saw that today. It was actually very cute.
Yeah, he was.
He looked.
In fact, I wish I got an earlier picture because he had his face in the sun, which was like actually, because then his eyes are squinting. Oh my goodness, what a cute dog. Okay, if you want to see pictures of my dog, you can join our Patreon.
Join the Discord.
Join the Discord. Yeah.
Okay. For $2 a month.
That's right. $2.50, please.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. So, Gunji, I said, taught her how to meditate. Echo comes over to chat. This is a Echo heavy episode, and for obvious reasons.
Right. Yeah.
Later on. So Echo comes over to chat. She asks if he ever meditates, but he says he doesn't like to meditate because he doesn't like the solitude.
Oh,
having
so
had enough,
sad.
Having had enough of it on Skako Minor, which of course is the planet that he was imprisoned on by the Separatists, right? He says that he's grateful for the Bad Batch for rescuing him, and Omega asks if that's why she joined the team, which I think is a really kind of like, it's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
Because we saw him do it, but his answer here is he did it. He doesn't really give a straight answer. He kind of thinks about it for a second. Doesn't really give a straight answer, which I find that when Omega asks questions, like no one gives her straight answers, which I think is extremely frustrating. But I guess people do that for children all the time. So
I mean, yeah, that's true.
Right. They'll tell you when you're older.
Yeah.
Kids are smarter than you give them credit for. You give them the information they're looking for.
When she's older than all of them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, but she's lived a very sheltered life.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, he says that he joined it because that's where he fit, which I think is a really beautiful way to foreshadow his decision later in the episode, right? He doesn't feel like he fits with the Batch anymore because he wants to do more to help other clones and help the galaxy. And Rex is doing that, and he feels like he can fit with him.
Yeah,
I think that's it's actually quite beautiful. So we then get a transmission from Rex himself asking for help on the mission. I love how Wrecker's like, oh, finally.
Yeah.
And doesn't hesitate to agree. And that he's tired of waiting for Sid. So there's like little reference to, hey, we're not on a Sid mission, so we're free. This reminds me of the joke from a 40-Year-Old Virgin when they're asking Steve Carell, "What are you free on Saturday?" And he's like, "I'm just kidding. I know you're free."
Yeah. Oh my god.
So Rex is like, you guys free for a mission? And like they're like, yep,
they're
we're
just
free.
Hanging out.
Yeah. And so Rex reveals that there's a mission is on Coruscant, which gives Hunter pause. Which I also noticed. I feel like Hunter has way too many teeth in his mouth. Like I don't know if you noticed this. Like the anime, like his teeth are like perfect, but it looks like there's too many of them in his mouth.
Like Tom Cruise.
It's very odd. Yeah. I don't know why I noticed that on that specific shot, but
I did not notice that.
Maybe I'm just distracted by his face tattoos all the time.
Maybe, yeah.
So I think this little sequence is funny because Hunter's like, oh my god, we can't go there, and this gives the perfect opportunity for Tech to give an expositionary little line to Omega, and she's like, well, why not? And he's like, it's the center of the galaxy and the heart of the Empire, right? In case anyone forgot.
Yes.
Echo jumps in, reminding them that the Empire thinks they're dead, and Hunter wants to keep it that way. This is said despite the fact that they had an obvious encounter with the Empire in the first 2 episodes of the season. There's no reason to believe that they would know about what Rampart did to that clone captain, and have every reason to suspect that the Empire knows that they're alive.
Right.
It's so ridiculous. I don't understand. That must be an error. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
you literally fought the Empire. They know exactly what you look like. You didn't kill that clone captain, and they saw you. Why would you think that they think you're still dead? Maybe because they've been monitoring traffic and or something
they haven't
like that.
Heard anything. Yeah, I mean maybe that because they might just be assuming that like even though they were kind of seen, they might have assumed that they weren't like recognized.
The softest and most generous take I can give here is that they were monitoring Imperial traffic, and because nothing was mentioned about them, they assumed that they were still. The secret was kept for some reason.
Yeah.
Which should also be alarming to them, for the record. But, All right, sorry, I was drinking there. Okay.
No.
Rex softens the blow a little bit by saying that this is a covert mission, a simple data extraction, and he'll send over details on how to get through Imperial security. Interestingly, it's Echo who answers first, saying that they're on their way. And then Hunter gives him kind of an interesting look, side eye. Anything, any other takeaways from this opening sequence here?
No, not really. I mean, it is kind of funny that they're just hanging out, like not doing much. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like seeing them in their downtime almost. I guess.
Would honestly, I would kill for an episode that didn't have some sort of like unnecessary, job of the week situation where it was them literally just hanging out, and we got to like interrogate them and like time. Exactly. Well, just having maybe not having a fun time, but maybe someone's having a crisis of conscience or whatever, and we can explore the characters deeper. And it's not really the type of show that would do that, but I've always appreciated the quote unquote bottle episodes that we get on television where the characters don't really leave, and it's all about character development. It's all about exploring inside the characters instead of some sort of wacky mission of the week thing. Even Star Trek does that for every once in a while, which is like lives on the wacky mission of the week. So
well, it might be interesting even to see them like having downtime, but like they just help somebody else out for like a completely unrelated reason. Like it's not a mission, it's not like a whatever. It's just kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, they'd be like buying like Melu runs or whatever. And then someone would like fall on them, and then they would get pulled into some sort of like wacky scenario.
Yeah, but, like, exactly. But yeah, I mean,
and I get that that's what happens. I just, personally speaking, I would appreciate something like that because they would give us an opportunity to explore like what does the rest of the Bad Batch think about Omega's future and about her, their future even, or there's just so many things that they could explore, and I just don't feel like it is explored enough. Okay, but we're not here to complain about what the show can be. We're going to talk about what the show is. Sorry, I just dropped my phone. Okay. Where was I? They land at the garage. That the usual one. Sorry, I actually skipped something here. I'm all over the place. Okay, they arrive at Coruscant. As they fly into the Coruscant airspace, Hunter tells everyone to stay ready. Reminds me of a little bit of the fly casual sequence from Return of the Jedi. We also get some very beautiful establishing shots of Coruscant, this time during the day. This reminding me a lot of the establishing shots of Coruscant we saw in Andor, kind of this really stark, bright lighting, which I feel like is a little bit brighter, a little bit whiter than we saw during the Clone Wars era. Well, just to kind of really feel like the starkness of this industrial place.
It's so interesting too to see like you said, the like stark white almost, and the really, really tall, fancy buildings where like obviously like the rich people live, and then you go down into the undercity where, like into those big like tunnels that go underground, the big wide ones, and they're like so dark and so different looking than the brightness above.
Yeah. No, I again, I think the best stuff that the show is doing is in environments right now. Okay. They land at the garage, and Rex intros Chuchi to the batch. There's a funny little bit with the camera, like doing this like quick little tilt down to Omega, which is hi, which is funny. Inside the garage, Rex fills them in on the situation while also revealing the dead body of the assassin in a really cool space body bag.
Yeah.
Because you know how like in any kind of situation like this, they would like walk over and like unzip the head side, right, so you could see their face. And this has got like a little head face window.
Like a window shield, yeah.
Yeah.
I also love that like Omega's right there and they're not shielding her from it. They're just letting this like...
I think Omega's seen many people die at this point.
I know, but to me it's just still funny like watching a kid like look, being allowed to like, look at that's
fair. I think that's fair because if I don't know if anyone's been watching The Last of Us in the most recent episode, there's a whole sequence about how Joel is like feels guilty for having Ellie having to deal with like violence at her age,
Right. Okay.
And like these kind of like and murder and all these things, and she's just fine with it in this case. But I get like again, that's not really the show the story this show is trying to tell. This is obviously, by the way, this is all both these episodes together are a kind of like mystery thriller, a political intrigue thriller type episode. There's lines specifically that reference to All the President's Men, which is kind of like the original movie that covers this type of stuff that deals with Watergate.
Okay.
And that's where that original line of "Follow the money" comes from. And they literally use that line in this episode. So,
okay.
it's not really a subtle comparison. So, all right, where were we? So, on top of the events of last episode, which Rex fills them in on, he says that the clone's identity number has been wiped, which even surprises Tech, who says he doesn't think that's even possible. The first takeaway, coming from Echo again, is why would a clone be targeting another clone or a senator? Chuchi says it's to keep them quiet about Kamino, but I think Echo's right to kind of question this deeper. They don't really interrogate this in a deeper way, but I think you have to wonder, okay, sure, yeah, yes, it was to keep you quiet, but they could have used any assassin for that. Where are they creating clones that are going to kill other clones?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and how does that work? I think that this episode doesn't explore that, but I think it's clear that they will. The show will. Echo offers to talk. This is so cute. Echo offers to talk to the Senate, but the idea is immediately shot down by Rex and Hunter, who are like, "Hey, they think you're a deserter. You can't just
go
just
talk
walk
to
into
them.
the Senate and have them believe you." So I think it's a little naive, I think, on Echo's part. Which I get, maybe that's a character thing that's like, I think, actually an interesting layer. Yeah, he's leaving the Bad Batch later in this episode to join up with Rex to feel like so they can fight the Empire. But he does have this level of naivete, right, about this whole situation, because if he thinks that is something that he could help with, what other things does he think that he can help with that he can't? Anyway, it's just something interesting. Anything else you'd want to add to this little sequence?
Yeah, no, I would kind of agree with you that I thought the same thing about Echo just like offering, like, oh, I'll just go talk to them. It's like, Echo, what the hell? Like, no, they're gonna throw you in jail or kill you.
Smarter than that? Yeah, I don't
know. But yeah, it's just like kind of like not the innocence of him, but a little bit. It's it's just such a, I don't know, it's so funny the different views that the clones kind of have, and
it's
they're
interesting
different,
how
like,
they're all unique from
like their strengths and weaknesses on like what they're I don't know, not what they're good at, but you know what I mean, like what their
beliefs and
exactly.
Someone made I heard someone on a podcast make the argument, and they were quoting somebody else, so I don't remember who the original attribution is to, but they were basically saying human cloning shouldn't be considered problematic unless you consider biological twins, to be problematic, because they're essentially clones, right? So, something to think about.
All right.
Yeah, identical twins are as close to clones as you can get in this modern world. Okay, so they all decide that the only way that they can get proof is to steal the data from Rampart's Venator, which is being retrofitted in the Imperial shipyards here on Coruscant. I thought that what we were going to see was kind of like the Venator being retrofitted into kind of a more of an example of the Imperial Star Destroyer. And I thought that would have been like a cool, kind of like the V-Wings are like kind of halfway between, a TIE fighter. It would have been like, they're retrofitting the Venators, and they're going to be a little bit more like the ISDs. But I guess that's not what's happening. They're still maintaining the double bridge, the two-towered bridge methodology versus the single bridge that the ISDs have. Anyway, it's just interesting. It's not what I thought it was, but I thought it was a cool opportunity.
Yeah. They're just giving it a new paint job, that's it.
It seems like it. Yeah. Painted gray. That's the
yeah.
Yeah. Rex knows a way in, but they only have until tomorrow's vote. So there's a 24-hour clock until they vote on the defense bill to get this data. Omega offers to stay with Chuchi, thank God, so that they're not encumbered on their secret mission.
Yeah, that'd be insane. You couldn't take her on that.
I mean, it is also insane that she just like walks into the Senate. that in and of itself is insane, but
I guess so. But they don't really know what she looks like. They don't know who she is.
Does Rampart not know exactly what she looks like?
I don't think he knows that she exists.
Huh.
Like, when would he have seen her?
I think that was kept secret for whatever
Yeah,
reason.
like she was just kind of like there at the facility, but like for the most part, like she just looks like she was helping.
It was the Kaminoans who wanted her back. It wasn't the Empire.
Yeah,
the Empire wanted to take out the Bad Batch, and they were. And it's interesting because she, like, literally like walks right up. He does give her he kind of doesn't look at her actually. I watched that scene twice just to be like, because you can see how they move their eyes. He sees Chuchi, comes up to her, and from down the hallway, so he can see context that there is a child with her.
Yeah,
but like in the Senate, maybe that's normal to have guests and stuff or whatever. So,
maybe, yeah, because he's just like, From what I know, I don't think he would have ever really seen her, but
yeah, he just walks up to her and like they had like, oh, it's good to see you,
just
and then immediately goes, oh, there's Masamita, I have to go talk to him.
Yeah,
right. So it's all it's still risky to put her there. But, it's still less risky than going on this mission. And it's kind of funny how the show constantly needs to find a way to keep Omega busy somewhere else so that they can do these more action-oriented missions. So.
Yeah. Her side quest.
That's right. So over at the Senate, Omega, with a cool new outfit, asks a very pertinent question. What does a senator do? And Chuchi's answer is, we act as the voice of the people, which of course doesn't help. So she just says, you'll see, basically.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned then that Rampart scene happens. Chuchi then shows Omega the Senate chamber, which is a beautiful scene. But she's surprised to learn that the clones aren't represented in the Senate. She says, I'm a clone. We're part of the galaxy too. We deserve a voice. And Chuchi tells her that she's fighting for the clone rights on their behalf, that she agrees with her and that they do deserve those rights. Will they get them? Time will tell.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think anyone knows that she could just go around the rest of her life not telling anyone she's a clone because she's the only female clone. So
yeah, like
there's no reason to believe that she is one for any reason.
No one would know, yeah.
But she keeps telling people that.
Yeah, probably
so
a really
funny.
bad idea. Like, you should not keep telling people
she's
that.
She's a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
And she's proud of her heritage, which is, I think it's actually quite nice. So they are interrupted by Bail Organa's droid again, who gives her a message. They go off to meet with Organa. She catches up with him and says that she's working on getting proof about the destruction of Kamino. Organa urges her to speak with Holly Bertoni, and I'm going to pull up another Wikipedia article here because this is a character that I'm sure appeared in other episodes. In fact, I know they did.
Yeah, they did.
But not
they're the Kaminoan, right?
Yes, she's a Kaminoan senator.
She shows up in that episode with Padme when Padme's like, she calls him Uncle something. He's the not Trandoshan, the
Rodian.
Rodian, yeah. And he gets like poisoned and killed like in that Senate. Like they're like all sipping cocktails, and Padme thinks like they set it up like it's supposed to be that Kaminoan who did it because she's kind of like evil.
Well,
she's like bad.
She's appointed to the Senate to give voice to the Kaminoans who are building the military. It's kind of it's like a bit of a weird loophole thing. So here, I'll read from the Wikipedia. Holly Bertoni was a female Kaminoan politician who represented her homeworld of Kamino in the Senate of the Galactic Republic from the Clone Wars until her removal from office in the early Imperial era. After the Kaminoan government leveraged the production of the Republic army of clone troopers into a seat in the Senate, Bertoni assumed the position and allied herself with militaristic and corporate interest groups, hoping to further the planet's economic gains. Bertoni opposed a peaceful resolution to the conflict between the Republic Confederacy of Independent Planets and advocated for the expansion of the Republic military through the increased production of clone soldiers and supported the deregulation of the banking industry to facilitate increases in war spending. Yeah, she's like the worst type of bureaucrat.
Yeah. What do you like, a warmonger?
Yeah. Bertoni's pro-war positions made her an opponent of a faction of anti-war senators, particularly Padme Amidala in Anaconda Farr. Because of her fierce dislike of Farr, Bertoni was implicated in his murder until it was revealed that she had been framed by the real culprit, his aide, Lolo Purs. After the war's end and the rise of the Galactic Empire in the Republic's stead, the Empire began cutting ties with the Kaminoans. Bertoni, a member of the Defense Finance Committee, was forcibly removed from office, in part for knowing that Camino had not received earmarked funding. So this is kind of it's interesting because this is all kind of plays into what we're about to talk about. The reason that this is a big deal is because the Senate had approved funding for more clone spending.
Right.
That money was not spent on that. And that what the money was spent on is not entirely clear and was not given Senate approval. And that's the issue, right? Or part of one of the issues.
Right.
When Imperial Admiral Rampart carried out the destruction of Kamino's cloning facilities, Bertoni agreed to testify about the misappropriated funds before the Senate as part of Senator Rio Chuchi's plan to approve the Empire planned Kamino's fate to force replacement of the clone empire with conscripted stormtroopers. So yeah, that's kind of the story of the rest of this episode, but we'll get into the details of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get back to it. So Organa says you need to speak to this Kaminoan, but it might not be easy getting her what's the word I'm looking for?
Help.
Her help.
Assistance. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that they were on the defense spending committee because it's like there's obviously clear.
Conflict of interest?
Conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not even it's like you should be as far away from that as possible.
Well, exactly. When you're the people
yeah.
getting that money to create that army, it's like you're the last people that should be just on that committee. Yeah.
So of course this is where we get the line "follow the money." And it always leaves a trail. So Chuchi then meets with Bertoni. This all happens very quickly, right? We're on a 24-hour clock here. Bertoni seems surprised to see Omega, but doesn't say anything. I think that's interesting as well. It's likely that Bertoni knew about Omega, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not too sure, but I mean, Omega tells her right away anyway. But
well, it's true. Yes, that is true. But she does mention that she had clearly knew Lama Su quite well.
Right. Yeah.
And say, he was overconfident, yada yada yada. Lama Su obviously knew about Omega, so it's possible that information was shared. I mean, again, these the knowing look at her at the very beginning, I think tells that she knows.
Yeah.
But she also makes her position clear that she doesn't care.
Yeah.
Because she's out for herself now. She was always kind of out for herself.
Yeah,
but now
I think
it's
she always
kind
of was, but just solidifies the fact that she does not care anymore. I mean, her whole planet is not gone, but the cities and all are all gone.
Yeah,
so
we don't know. I mean, there's a handful of Kaminoans left alive, but for all we know, she knows about a secret homeworld somewhere that we don't know about. Right?
Yeah, very true.
So she admits to knowing about the misappropriated spending, but doesn't go deeper, saying that Chuchi is a fool to involve her, and that it's dangerous, and that she's now looking out for herself. I think this is a really interesting part too, because as I mentioned before, Chuchi is going about this in a kind of very clunky way, right?
Right.
I think if she had done this in a more a less obvious way, Palpatine wouldn't have been able to so easily flip the narrative like he does.
Oh yeah, probably.
Right?
If she did it a little quieter.
Yeah, if this was all a surprise, if this happened and no one knew about it, would Masamita have been ready to just be like, yeah, he was obviously acting alone. Let me quickly talk to the Empire.
Right? Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
you know what I mean? Like it just that's I just think that was kind of her downfall, and I think she's right. Like, you are a fool for doing it this way, but you know, to some degree, it's one of those things. Like, it's kind of like that lady at the end of episode 3 who was like, you know, so much for peace, right? It's like at some point you don't have any plays left, so maybe, you know, you'll just go along with it, because what else do you have to do? You know, what else do you have to lose at this point? So this obviously pisses off Omega, who talks about being a clone herself, like you said, and then she's like saying that she's angry and wants justice for what happened to her home. This is interesting because it reminds me of a young Anakin, right?
Yeah.
Who's pissed about having been a slave and about his mom not being, you know, his mom dying and him not being able to do anything about it. So you kind of get this impression. So if she is Force sensitive, she's already halfway down the path to the dark side. So take that for what you will, I guess.
Yeah. Gonna have to learn how to wrangle that in.
Yeah, I guess so. Keep meditating. You'll get there.
She's got a lot of emotions, so I don't know.
She does have a lot of emotions. She has massive fear of abandonment. Right?
Yeah.
Like, massive fear of abandonment, which is like extremely easy to exploit from from a dark side perspective. So, you know, maybe we catch up with her in 20 years and she's a dark side user, and they have to be like walked back from the dark side at some point. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. This like outburst by Omega seems to soften Bertoni, who says she's always suspected an attack was imminent, and that Lama Su is arrogant about how important the clones were to the Empire. She kind of assumed that the clones would always, you know, she says so as says as much in the or I guess it's he says as much at in the last season, right? It's like, you know, we're fine. They're always going to need the clones. They're better soldiers anyway. Yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So she agrees to go along with the plan, but says that it's not going to be enough to just have her. They need to have proof as well. So that's. I think the other thing is, this is the other thing that I like. She's like, because I think this, despite being kind of jaded, this Bertoni, she's obviously quite smart, because she says that, listen, I'll go along with your stuff, because this ultimately doesn't really make a much big difference to me. You're going to need hard proof, but even if you do get the hard proof, Admiral Rampart is just a cog in the machine.
Right, yeah.
And we see that play out in real time, which is, I think, very fascinating.
Yep.
So, cut to the shipyards. Actually, before we do that, anything else you want to add on these meetings, basically?
No, I just I kind of, along with you, I do think it's funny that Omega just keeps telling people that she's a clone. Because as soon as she said that to Bertoni there, I was like, what the hell? I was like, you can't trust this person to not
right.
You don't know if she's just going to immediately go tell the Emperor or whoever, be like, there's a little girl up there hanging out with Chuchi that says she's a clone. So wondering where she came from.
Can someone look into that, please?
Yeah, what the hell? But yeah, it is funny, but I agree with you that it's interesting how much insight that Bertoni also has on the inner workings of the Empire, and just being like, yeah, Rampart is not.
He's not the big fish. It's not gonna do what you think it's gonna do.
Yeah,
I think that's the message. But again, I think she's like, I don't have anything else to lose at this point.
Yeah, she doesn't care.
Because either that, or there's no otherwise the motivations don't really align. There's no reason for her to go along with this otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay. So that takes us to the shipyards, and we get a very cool establishing shot of the Venator from the front in that trench. This, of course, reminds me of the scene from Revenge of the Sith when Obi-Wan and Anakin are saying bye before Obi-Wan heads off to Utapau.
Right.
And they're in that kind of the Venator is parked, and we see the clones running around. It's a cool visual. So we see the batch climbing up past this giant spinning electrical thing, and I don't know what that is, but it's super cool looking. And it turns out they're in the maintenance tunnels, and Rex has a line, I haven't been in these since the war, which I think he's referring to the time that he was there when Ahsoka was on the run. That's my...
Oh, maybe.
I think
Interesting.
I think that's the connection there. Now, while Wrecker works on getting through a door, Echo and Rex have a little chat. Rex is working to help clones around the galaxy, but he's it's been tough sledding. He says clones are waking up, which again, loaded word language and or kind of modern day. I think it's becoming co-opted by conspiracy theorists. We'll just call it that. As like, you got to wake up and you could
see that the Earth is flat.
See that the Earth is flat, exactly. So that's interesting. But then he also says that troopers who know too much are a liability to the Empire. So he's working to save them. And that he works with a few contacts he trusts, but help is hard to come by. So I guess, okay, who's he working with? At this point, he's probably not working. He probably is aware of Ahsoka's whereabouts, but isn't working with her.
Probably not working with her directly, no.
Yeah, he's probably working with Gregor at this point.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what happened with Gregor after the end of... Do we? What happened with Gregor at the end of last season? Do we remember?
Well, he ends up, like, Gregor and Wolf and Rex are all together in Rebels.
The Bad Batch rescue them at the... rescue Gregor on Mount Tantus at the end of last season.
Right.
I don't remember what happens with him.
I don't remember either.
But I'm sure he's working with him.
I know he lives because he's with Rex.
Yeah, he's in Rebels.
And Wolf in Rebels, but...
after putting on a few pounds.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe Cody, he's helping out now because Cody's recently...
Possibly. We don't know about Cody's
taken off. So, like, yeah, like he's AWOL. So I'm like, I would assume if he needed help getting out, that Rex would have helped him.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, yeah, I don't know. We don't really know who else he's working closely with.
Well, yeah, and Echo's point is like it's dangerous for you to be on Coruscant, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't agree with that necessarily because wouldn't the easiest again, we brought this up before, but the easiest thing for the clones to do would be to blend in with other clones. It's so easy.
Right.
Just change your hair color. And all of a sudden you could be anyone, right?
Yeah, like I don't know if to them there's more distinguishing characteristics.
He doesn't have a scar on his face like Cody does or
yeah, it's true.
And like
or like
same
a
with
face tattoo.
Yeah, or face tattoo. Or same with the clone who died in the last episode, Slip. He's got this really distinctive beard. Shave your beard, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Wear your armor and no one like there's just a million things you could do to be disguised as a clone. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. He does say that it's that help is hard to come by, which I think triggers Echo here.
Yeah.
So this made me laugh. And they're like, Hunter's like, okay, so what's the plan? How are we getting into this Venator? And he says, well, I'm taking a page out of your book, and we're going to improvise, which is not a plan.
There's no plan. Yeah, we're just going to do it.
I duped you into coming to this extremely dangerous location, and I don't have a plan.
Yeah, with absolutely nothing written down. Yeah, we're just going to wing it.
He knows where the ship is. That's really what he brought to the table here.
Yeah, crazy dangerous. Also, we're breaking into ramparts.
Also, why do you think he doesn't use his
Venator?
Why do you think he doesn't use his armor in this sequence?
Rex?
Yeah,
I'm assuming because it's too recognizable. I don't know. He's probably trying to
so
keep
is the clone armor. So is the clone Force 99 armor. Like that's the most.
That's true, but maybe Rex is because I think at this point
they think he's dead. They know they think he's dead, and they don't.
They think he's dead. Yeah. So I think that's why. Like
he doesn't want to take the chance of being tipped off. And then I guess it's good that assassin is also dead because he also knew that Rex was Rex. So.
Because as far as everybody else is concerned, he's dead.
When do you think we're getting Rex and Cody in live action again? I think it's happening. I think we're gonna get live for Cody. It's again, but in live action for Rex for the first time. I know Tamora Morrison has said that he wants to play Rex. Do you think it happens in a Obi-Wan season 2 or Andor season 2?
It's got to depend like timeline and where Ahsoka? It makes sense and like where it makes sense for Tamora Morrison's age to make sense Ahsoka. With Rex, I guess. But yeah,
I'm like he's older than he'd be even older than that though. I feel like he's got to be dead by that point.
That's what I mean. Right? I'm like that might be too long, like the Ahsoka series. So maybe Obi-Wan, like. That
we don't know. Yeah, exactly.
If there is a second season or whatever, or like I don't know, Andor.
Yeah,
could show up in season 2 of Andor. But yeah, you're right. It's like it's finicky because you got to make sure you're not. Because Rex, yeah. I mean, well, he's alive. What at the end of episode 6?
That's right. He is.
Yeah, he's still technically alive then, so I don't know.
Yeah, but he's got to be like in his 80s by that point.
He's old,
right?
yeah. He's an old. They just say they're like, yeah, that one old looking rebel is
well,
is
I
Rex.
think that's technically apparently not technically true, but it's still my headcanon. So
I thought it was canon that they said it was him.
I don't know if that's entirely true. I think that character's already had been named, and that to make it Rex would be a retcon, and I think that they were just nodding to that, but it's not.
Maybe
it's not necessarily
officially
that's Rex. But in my head, it is, and I prefer that.
Yeah.
Okay. So where were we?
They're breaking into
improvising.
the ship. Yeah, right. Improvising.
So to improvise, that apparently means they need to use a transport skiff to get across the shipyard without being detected, which also feels like stretching believability because like there's 5 people hanging off this thing. But
including
anyway,
Wrecker, who like jumps on their way last minute and is making a bunch of noise.
Oh, you do love the scene. He's like, he's still not good with heights. He's like, this is him better with heights, which is which is good. They enter through a hatch on the top of the ship after hijacking the droid, or like the controls from the droid. I thought that was kind of clever. Inside, they make their way to the bridge, stunning a few clones on the way. I thought the bridge looked very good from the way that they had like the hollow of the ship was on there. I just thought it looked super cool. Tech mentions the gotcha, which is they need to reroute power to get the data, which will trigger a security breach.
Right.
So they decide, okay, we'll do it, but let's do it quick. You make it quick line is always good. I always appreciate that. Security is then tripped, and clones are sent to investigate. They seal the door by shooting it, which is the controls. Classic Star Wars move.
Classic, yeah.
Love that. But it doesn't really work for very long. The clones break through, and there's a pretty cool shootout that happens here on the bridge. And the clones call for backup, including V-Wings, which are sent to...
nuts.
I'm not sure do what exactly, but...
Yeah, I was like, what are they just fly around? I don't know.
Well, I guess they don't know. They don't know what's happening. So
that's true. Yeah, they're not too sure. Like, are they trying to steal the ship? Like, what are they? Yeah, fair enough. I did notice that we have our blasters on stun again this episode.
That's right. They only killed those clones that were on Kashyyyk.
Yeah,
we're back. Hey, show. We caught that. We saw it.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't think we didn't see it. We saw it. You're back to stun now, but we saw. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd also be interesting to see it. Like, I don't think they set them to stun when they're shooting stormtroopers, though, right? The TK troopers last season they weren't using stun on those. But were they switching back and forth between, like when they were? I guess when they were shooting when they were like fighting against those commandos. They didn't have them on stun either, I don't think. So
I don't think so. But then Wrecker was also like shooting down entire ships in that other episode too. So.
That's right. There's clones. They've 100% murdered clones since they
blasters stun ships, rocket launcher.
Yeah, that's exactly. There's no. You could use an ion blast on ships. That's like the same. Okay. And then if it crashes, they're still dead. So
yeah.
What are you gonna do? So Hunter calls in plans 14, 5, and 86. And I honestly, I didn't do the work to see if we'd seen those before, but it's possible that we have. While Echo takes out the V-Wings with the weapons on the Venator, which is kind of cool. Plan 5 is apparently to turn on the ship's engines, which causes diversion. I thought that was a brilliant move. I was like, how the hell are they going to get out of here?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense to like, I thought they were going to try and like, basically kind of what they did, but a little more so. Like sure. I thought they were going to try
the ship away and then
not necessarily fly it, but like crash it a little harder.
Right.
Like,
sure. Yeah,
give it a little bit more forward momentum than they did, but make them think they were trying to like fly
it. And like, do you think they planned this part, or is this part of the improvising? Too?
I think that's part of the improvising.
Oh man, you didn't come up with an escape plan? Come on.
Yeah.
So their next plan is to go over the incoming security teams, and they use the escape pods to do that, launching all of them at once. And Tech drives their escape pod like one of those speeders from that last episode. And they land, I guess, in a secluded location. I don't understand why it's not, more clones aren't dispatched to that location immediately.
Yeah.
But
I think they kind of land
anyway.
where they came in, like from that, like not a sewer grate, but like
the access shaft.
Access shafts. So yeah, they kind of land. He tries to land the pod like back around that access shaft again.
Yeah, anyway, I think that's kind of cool. And even like they don't know where they were going to land anyway. So if they had landed and got out quick enough, it doesn't matter if they'd sent clones. They would have later, but they were gone by then. Any thoughts on this action sequence? This is like really the only action sequence in the entire.
Yeah, I mean, it was
not entirely.
It was nice and quick. Yeah, like it didn't need to be dragged out too far, but I kind of agree with you where there's a minute there where I'm like, how the hell are these guys going to get out of here? Because it's like they're in the middle of a compound surrounded, right? So
yeah, I actually think they do a pretty good job of making it seem believable.
Yeah,
I thought the action sequence, I shouldn't say it was the only action sequence because that one in that boiler room thing was pretty cool. But this is more kind of like equal fight. It's more of a fair fight in this case. Yeah. Okay, so to the Senate, and Rampart is urging for the vote to go through. We're running out of time is the implication here. Chuchi pushes back using Bertoni's testimony. She's stalling. Meanwhile, Omega is waiting outside. This I thought was so funny. Rex drives up in this speeder.
Yeah.
And like they rush it inside. I've never seen them drive a speeder like that before in that way, so it's kind of funny. Rampart is still defending himself, saying that the funds were not misappropriated, but they're reallocated.
Right.
And which is a weasel word. But then Chuchi goes right for the jugular and accuses him of destroying Camino directly, which is kind of like uncouth unless you have proof.
Right.
At first, he kind of refuses to acknowledge it. He's like, I'm not even going to dignify you with a response. right? And which I think, listen, it's not fair to say that anyone who says that is immediately guilty, but like...
But I mean, yeah, you are.
But like a lot of the time, people who say that are guilty, so we'll just say that.
Yeah, that's like a stalling tactic to try and come up with a lie. Like, right. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. It's like, why? Because you don't have one because you're trying to make up a lie right now?
Yeah, I watched a movie, an Oscar movie, the what's it called? The Banshees of Inisherin.
Okay.
It's very good. I really, really liked it. But it's set on this like remote Irish island, like a secluded Irish island, and set in like the 1920s. And the language is very like classic Irish, and it's amusing to listen to. It's like it's nice to listen to. But it's so funny because I don't know if this is something that's like the director, who's also Irish, kind of brings to it necessarily. But they all do this thing where someone says something to them that they don't want to answer. They go, "What?"
Yeah.
like so, and then the other person has to say it again in a more direct way. But they all stall for time, and that that reminds me of that as well. Amazing movie, highly recommended. Not at all what you think it is. Okay, so things are getting heated in the Senate, right? Everyone's like, "Oh, blah, blah, mumble, mumble, mumble." Wow, can't believe she accused him of that. And then Organa, just as I guess this is at the exact same moment, Organa gets the evidence from Chuchi for Chuchi. Just before she can be shouted down by the bad guys, basically, who are like, I motion to expel her from the chambers for such a crazy assumption, right?
Right, yeah.
But then Organa reveals the evidence to the entire Senate, which happens to be a hollow of the entire attack.
Oh, how cool did that look?
It's very cool. I
didn't
expect it to be like that because they're like, well, we saved records of it on this backup server. I thought it would just be like data, but it's not. It's like a video footage, which is way cooler.
Video footage, yeah. Which is cool, and I thought it was cool that it like took up the entire space in the whatever you call that room.
Yeah, the Senate chambers.
The Senate chambers. I'm like, oh, that looks really cool.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah,
it really does look really cool. And everyone freaks out again. They're like, "Oh my god, can you believe this evidence? Oh my god!" And then this ominous alarm starts to play. And I'm like, "Oh shit!"
Right as soon as I was like, "Oh, here he comes."
I thought this was really cool for two reasons. So Emperor Palpatine comes up through the floor with Masamida, and it was always cool seeing, even in the prequels, this like rising thing. It's like in his office. It's like his desk, basically.
Right.
And then, goes not exactly, but it's like it's got this lower chamber, and you can be in it, and then we see it kind of explored in that Yoda Palpatine fight,
right? Yeah.
in Revenge of the Sith, which is cool. By the way, I don't know if you know this. That sequence was kind of done by Spielberg. That was a Spielberg-esque thing.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. No, but yeah, when he comes up through the floor like that, I don't know. It always reminds me of like the Bat Cave, like a.
Oh yeah, well it's very cool. A rising platform of any kind is very cool.
Like when the car, his car comes up through like a waterfall or something. It's like, yeah, it always gives me Batman vibes.
Well, yeah, it's literally in Batman. So
yeah.
So this is why I think this is really cool. It's because it's this like parallel with the Revenge of the Sith scene where Padme is like, and this is how democracy dies, right?
Right.
With thunderous applause.
Thunderous applause.
Right. So there's that scene, and she's sitting there feeling defeated as she's watching this thing happen. And the way they did it this time is they have Omega come deliver the evidence, and then she's sitting in that little doorway where the little pods come from, and she's watching, kind of being the surrogate for Padme, who at that time, someone who's becoming disillusioned, I guess, at that point, with the way that things were working. And things play out in such a similar way, like this way the Palpatine twists the truth to further his own ends, and then how, the end result is that they did all the right things, but it still worked out for Palpatine.
Yeah. And like, yeah.
I just think and the way it's shot, the way that it's
the music is so good too.
The music is good too. Yeah. I mean, they use the Palpatine's theme here.
Yeah.
But like, obviously having Ian McDermott here voicing the character is awesome. I just love anytime we get Ian McDermott's. I mean, it's so pitch perfect, and he obviously understands how to do the Emperor now. Like he could just do it in his sleep. But
of course,
it's so good how he uses lines like, how he says, "I'm deeply troubled by this recent revelation." Sorry, and he like Rampart will face the consequences for his treachery. Right?
Yeah.
And then I also, my favorite line is he was concerned about how the clones followed out his orders without hesitation.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a direct analog to Order 66 when I think he says,
yeah, exactly.
Do not hesitate, right?
Yeah.
To the clones, because of course the whole point was they followed orders without hesitation.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah, because before it was like, oh, they don't follow orders well enough. That was the issue with them last season. Now they follow orders too well. It's very it's very convenient.
Well, and it's just like when they're like grabbing Rampart and stuff, and it's like, come on, man, this is your chance. Like you need to yell out that like it was his orders. Like that he
was trying to, but they turned off his mic.
Yeah.
They shut off his mic. I love seeing the shock troopers too, though. That's like the clone shock troopers. It just, I don't know. I love seeing the shock troopers in the Imperial Senate. We've seen it before in the Clone Wars, but I just think it's, for whatever reason, those two visuals together are very cool to me. So here we'll go through it. So Palpatine comes up to the floor. He says he's deeply troubled by the recent revelation, but thanks Senator Chuchi for revealing this bad actor. In the Empire, Masamita calls for Rampart's arrest, and despite him shouting that he was following orders, nothing will come of that. And he says that it was an unprovoked attack to further his own agenda. Now, to be fair, it was to further his own agenda.
Yeah.
But it also wasn't just his own agenda.
But I also think it's so funny that Palpatine is able to twist it in a way, being like, as to like why they need to initiate the stormtrooper initiative. But it's like, like that's what Rampart wanted all along, so you're just doing like technically.
Well, yeah, he's a scapegoat now. I mean, I don't know if that was the episode implies that this was always the plan.
Yes,
but I don't think that was the case. I honestly don't think so. And actually, I this idea that like, well, the Empire got what it wanted. The Emperor got what it needed. But I think does still hurt them to some degree. It hurts their credibility, I think.
Oh yeah,
still.
But maybe it was always like a backup plan. You know, like Palpatine
He's
is
got plans for his plans. Yeah,
pretty evil. So he's like, okay, well, if Rampart can't get this thing passed on his own, then we'll just use him as a scapegoat, and like, you know, we'll figure out some way to leak this information that you know, he was involved with destroying Camino, and then we can just twist that. So I'm like, I'm sure this was probably maybe a little bit of a backup plan, but maybe not the backup plan that maybe not the way that he wanted the backup plan to be released. Like, he's probably still pissed.
Yeah. It would have been nice to see that to further get clarity on it.
Yeah. I would like to see the Emperor fuming in his office a little bit, listening to what was going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then have him come up. Yeah,
but I think that removes some of the scariness.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think that's the idea.
Yeah.
I also like the looks on the senators when he arrives is like, whoa, you know, like he's here. That's such. I think
it kind of sounds like he doesn't show up very often. So.
Yeah, and Ryan Airy kind of talks about this in his video, which is like it's purposeful because it doesn't it removes power from the Senate. It looks like he doesn't think it's important, and therefore regular people will think it's less important.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's also like interesting because now he's the emperor. He can come in and just make an executive order and be like, "Yep, we're doing this now."
But that's not really what he's saying. He's just advocating on behalf of the bill.
Yeah. He's still, but yeah, he's doing that thing, making it seem like it's everybody else's idea, not his.
Yeah. So he says, you know, that Rampart didn't act alone. The clones follow his orders without hesitation, and that gives him pause. It's time for a change. They still need protection, and given the bill that happens to just already be up for vote, I believe that this legislation is our future, and with this momentous act, we will usher in a new era heralded by the Imperial Stormtrooper.
Yeah.
Imperial Stormtrooper.
I don't know why, but like that line, like the ushering in a new era, it reminds me of Lion King when Scar takes over and he talks about being like a new era of lion and hyena. Like,
yeah, no, that's fair. I know, but this is like that. This is another kind of parallel to that Revenge of the Sith scene, because you know, and that says, you know, the Republic will be reorganized into the first galactic empire, and this is kind of that same concept of like, you know, this momentous act will end the clones and start the Stormtrooper program.
Yeah,
you know?
it's all going to be better. Look at this. We're inviting people this time to join our army. We're not creating them to blindly.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting is that in the very first episode, Organa claims that to create an army of recruits goes against everything that they stood for as the Republic, and I just find that really interesting that like there's just no demand for pushback anymore at this point.
Yeah.
So the Emperor's theme plays loudly. Omega looks shocked, and we cut away. Rex. The next thing we see is Rex is pissed that Palpatine steps ahead of them again, and you know, he says that we played right into his hand. And I just don't agree that that's exactly what happened. I think they they had no way to know that they were going to recruit the Bad Batch to get that information so that it would, you know, I just don't.
No, of course not. It's just, yeah, I think I just get what Rex is kind of getting after, of just being like, this was probably part of the plan all along. Like, maybe not the way it played out exactly, but like the ending of it was probably, at least, like I said, either Rampart was able to pull this off on his own or he wasn't, and then they were just going to do this anyway and use him as a scapegoat.
Right. But
it just so happened that the Bad Batch, unfortunately, were the ones to push that forward.
Mm-hmm.
But
so Omega doesn't really understand how this all played out. She's kind of very confused by what's going on here. They clarify that basically they did the right thing, but the truth was twisted for the Empire's gains. And then they say this other thing that I also feel like is not fair. The fate of the clones is now sealed, and it's all because of us. It's our fault. They're blaming themselves for basically condemning the clones when that was already going to happen anyway, and this might have been the final nail. But it's, you know, they had no way of knowing that what they were doing was going to lead to this. they did do the right thing. So I just don't feel like it's fair for them to blame themselves for this.
No, I don't think so either. It's just you got played by the Emperor. It's what he does.
Yeah. Chuchi promised to keep fighting for the clones' rights, however much that's going to help at this point. And then they all start saying goodbye. But then the batch also starts saying goodbye to Echo, and Omega still doesn't get it. She's like, what do you mean? What's going on? Again, revealing her kind of extreme fear of abandonment. Echo reveals that he's going to go with Rex to help him. Omega is not happy about it. She's like,
no.
We're a squad. You can't leave me. And, he does the usual thing. He promises he'll be back, and there's no way to know if he will. And he tells her to keep up with her training until he does. He gets a nice big hug, and it's quite sweet. And she gives a nod to Rex. I think the idea there, like, take care of him, I think is what she's kind of implying. And then we get some really sad music as Omega's theme plays in the background. She gets on the ship, and they fly off. The final shot is of Omega hugging her stuffed animal in her room. Before we cut to the Bad Batch theme over the credits. Now, the question here is, of course, what do you make of Echo leaving the team?
So here's kind of what I was thinking. Even throughout this season, I kind of felt like Echo didn't have a lot to do when he's with the Bad Batch, because they have tech already, and I just feel like he doesn't, it's true, I just feel like he's not that he doesn't have a place, but the stuff that Echo can do, I think
his specialties are already on
the team. Tech already has it, so I feel like a lot of the time Echo has been not left behind or whatever, but it's just he
does come off as whiny as a little bit, and he's always advocating for, and again, he's advocating for doing the right thing. We have to help. We need to do more. He keeps saying that all the time, right?
Yeah, and
but
he's
that,
not.
Became his only role, was to be the advocate for the becoming basically the team's conscience.
Exactly.
And I think at this point, Omega is clearly that role. Can take down that role, and I don't know. I mean, I think it's an interesting move to put him back with Rex. I think it's very cool, actually. I'm not at all. I'm not mad about it.
No, I think it's a good move. I think it is better suited for his character and where his character development is at right now.
But also, where do we see his stories?
Well,
where are we going to see Rex and
I don't know.
Echo doing stuff? I don't think we're gonna.
Well, and at the same time, Echo doesn't have the plot armor that Rex does.
No, he does not.
Because we don't see him in Rebels. So
maybe he dies of cancer because of all the droid parts in him.
Oh my god.
Well, no, something less violent is what I'm saying.
Fuck. But
all the clones die of stuff very violently, and it's maybe he gets to die
maybe he just gets sick and dies.
Maybe he just gets sick and dies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So
I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying.
I know. But I just feel like Echo, his story, it could go a lot longer. It could be a lot shorter. We don't really know. It's a little more up in the air with him. But I think putting him back with Rex makes sense. To me, that's...
Yeah, I agree.
Not necessarily where he belongs, but I think that's a good spot for him. And I don't think it's going to harm the Bad Batch to not have him, as bad as that sounds. It's just I just feel like he wasn't as useful with them.
Do you think
with what he wanted to do too?
Right. So this was set up in Clone Wars season 7, right? And the Bad Batch is used to rescue him from Skako Minor. It's this big. I don't love that arc. I think it's quite boisterous. I don't think it's that exciting, to be honest.
Right.
The Batch gets much more interesting later on when they have their own show, obviously. But and then in that episode, he's like, "I'm going to join the team," right?
Yeah,
And I think maybe that decision was made at that time because it was like, well, maybe they needed someone that we know already to kind of be a bridge into this team.
Right. Yeah.
And then, but I get the impression that they're like, oh crap, we don't really have a spot for him here.
Yeah, I know.
They're
That's
walking
kind of how
it back
I feel.
like this was that this is kind of like a correction that they're making, and not an organic story choice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it does come to some degree organically in the sense that it never felt like he fit. And now he's going back with Rex, which does feel organic, but that it all comes out of this original decision, which, I don't necessarily at this, in retrospect, doesn't necessarily come off as the best one. Right. So
yeah. Like at the time, it's almost kind of a bummer when they're like, oh, like we just get Echo back and he's leaving with the Bad Batch. Like you feel like his troop is kind of like bummed about it. Like Rex is kind of bummed about it, but he understands like that's what he needed to do at that time. But I feel like now things have changed for him and he's like, no, like he wants to help other clones.
Yeah.
And that's not what the Bad Batch are really going to be doing. They're still kind of working for Sid and doing these other things. And like, that's just not aligning with what Echo wants to do anymore.
They're not as much as individuals as Echo is, right? Echo is more of an individual because he didn't come from this like close-knit team. They can't really go off on their own, each of them. I mean, Crosshair did, but that was kind of forced to some degree. So I don't know. I just like, I respect his decision. I think it's interesting that the others do as well. And I think Omega will come to understand it a little bit more. I think she's probably a little bit in denial now, but she'll figure it out. And I think obviously we'll probably see them again this season, to be honest. So
I would assume so. But I think his character will be of more like help to Rex than he would be to the Bad Batch. So
yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on that note, I think we can wrap it up there. Any final thoughts on this two-parter?
No, I mean I enjoyed it. Like I love getting into these kind of nitty-gritty things about like how things played out. Especially, it's always good when you get to see the Emperor.
Well, you get to see Ian McDermott
fucking
play
around.
The Emperor. It's just great. I mean, and honestly,
so
it's just like this stuff is important. It matters.
Yeah.
quote unquote, to the story of the clones, and it's deep, and like I said, it's layered and it's nuanced, and I just think it's much more complex of a story to tell than we've seen in the last couple episodes, and it's refreshing to see. It feels weighty. When I'm watching it, like I get like really absorbed into it. I'm seeing something like this for the first time, and it's like, wow, this is really interesting and consequential, and like, what is this? And it changes how you think about other aspects of Star Wars, and I think that's, we talk about canon sometimes being a weight that's around a creator's neck, but this type of stuff, I think Filoni has become a master at it, because he's able to now weave these stories into existing frameworks so well that it feels, in some cases it feels like, okay, you're trying to fix something that was dumb, but in other cases it's just adding these layers of intrigue that I think feel very appropriate. In this case, it's the latter. So
and I
really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel like it's just kind of filling out the story as a whole, which I like. So there's, there's always these little things that we've wondered about, like, oh, I wonder how that happened, or I wonder how, like, what happened to the clones after, and, how all these different things came about. Like, how do they start getting stormtroopers, right? So it's just interesting getting these little tidbits
it's funny
piece by piece.
That. Let's continue a new tradition here on the show, which is reading an IMDb review. This is from Sir Davos, which is nice. That's a nice Game of Thrones reference. This is a 10 out of 10 review. And it's titled "Filoni Just Keeps Filling the Gaps."
Yeah.
So this is a review of Truth and Consequences. Won't get into spoilers, but this two-part arc answers some of the biggest questions in the franchise that have been left open for years. Filoni continues to use these animated series to fill gaps left by Lucas and others in sensible and engaging ways. He doesn't do it by bringing in random, unfamiliar characters either. He uses what's already been established and keeps building. Now, that piece, I feel like you can argue, is a positive and a negative, and you talked about that before.
Right,
sometimes it can feel a little small. After a few filler episodes, I'm fully back to being bought into the show and can't wait to see what other questions will be answered as the season goes on. I just wish some of the other Star Wars shows and films with triple the runtime had as a compelling story as this does. There's nothing like Star Wars when there's competent writing behind it. Yeah, I agree. Just look at Andor as an example. The rating has let this series down a few too many times, in my opinion. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Well, on that positive note, we will wrap things up there. That's a long one. Apologies to everyone, because I know it's always sometimes a little bit longer. We're like coming in at almost 2 hours here, just over 2 hours. So that's an hour per 30-minute episode.
Yeah.
But like we said, hey, we set new records for shortest episode after those filler, quote unquote filler episodes, which we don't use that word here.
We've got a good mix of shorter episodes and long episodes.
Yeah, well, I hope you don't get these two-parters all the time, and this is just very compelling. So, okay. On that lovely note, as I just said before, we'll wrap things up. Follow us on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast, Facebook.com/TowerBabbleCast. Help support the show. Patreon.com/TowerBabbleCast. $2.50 or $5, depending what you're looking to do. And if you have any comments, questions, you want to leave your own review, TowerBabblePodcast@gmail.com is where to send those emails. And we'll be back next week with another episode of The Bad Batch. This one is called The Crossing. And there's no double feature next week.
Crosshair next episode.
Ooh, yeah. You know what? Maybe. I didn't even put those together, but I think that's a good guess. We'll find out next week. Until then, may the Force be with you.